Hey everyone. So have you ever thought about those employee surveys like all those companies send out? You know, the ones with the open-ended questions where you can just write whatever?
Yeah, those are super interesting.
Like it seems like they could get some really valuable feedback that way, but
Right.
someone's actually got to read all those responses.
Yeah, it can be a really big job. It takes a ton of time to analyze all of those responses.
Mm-hmm.
But what if there was a way to kind of automate it?
Oh, interesting.
What if AI could do the work of reading and summarizing thousands of comments?
That would be amazing. But how do we know like the AI is doing it right? Is it kind of like the fox guarding the henhouse?
That's a great question, and that's where this gets really interesting. Researchers are looking at this idea of AI judging AI.
Oh, wow.
So imagine a second AI acts as a judge, and it actually evaluates the summaries that the first AI created.
So it's like double checking the work.
Exactly.
That's really clever.
Wow.
But how do we know if the judge is like making the right call?
Well, that's where the research paper comes in that we're going to be diving into today. It's called Potential and Perils of Large Language Models as Judges of Unstructured Textual Data.
Catchy title.
And they actually used a real data set, over 13,000 employee comments from a survey where they asked employees what they want their senior leaders to know.
Wow.
And it's even segmented by different business lines. So it's really interesting data.
So they took this judge AI and pointed it at all these summaries to see how well it did.
Exactly, yeah. They use different large language models, or LLMs, for the summarizing and the judging tasks. So the judge AI is looking for what the researchers call alignment, basically. How well does the summary reflect the original data? So things like, are the themes accurately identified? Are the quotes that are chosen actually representative of those themes?
Okay, got it. But how did they know if the judge AI was any good at its job? Like, did they have anything to compare it to?
They did. They actually compared the AI judges' assessments with human evaluations. So they had actual people look at the summaries and judge their accuracy, so they could compare how close the AI's judgments were to human judgments.
So it's kind of like humans versus machines. Who won?
Well, the results were pretty surprising. The AI judges were very consistent with each other, and they often lined up really well with the human judgment, more than you might expect.
Really? So machines are getting pretty good at this, huh?
It seems that way, but there's a catch.
Uh-oh.
While the AI judges did a really impressive job overall, the research did find that sometimes they didn't quite get it right. Sometimes they missed these subtle details or nuances that the human reviewers were able to pick up on.
So maybe not ready to hand over the reins completely just yet.
Right, exactly. And that's really a key takeaway here. AI has incredible potential in this area, but there's still a lot of room for improvement, especially when it comes to understanding those finer points that humans are so good at picking up on.
Okay, so this is getting really interesting to me. Can you give me an example of where the AI judges maybe missed the mark?
Sure. In one case, the AI judge was focused on these general similarities between the themes and the summary, but the human evaluators noticed that one of the quotes actually introduced a new angle to the theme that the AI completely missed.
So the AI was kind of looking at the big picture, but missing some of the little details that were important.
Yeah.
So that really highlights the need for the human touch, especially when you're dealing with something as complex as employee feedback. So where do we go from here? What are the implications of all this?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's exactly what we'll be exploring in part 2 of this deep dive. We're going to be talking about those broader implications, especially for the future of work. And we'll really get into that balance between AI's potential and the continued need for human oversight.
Welcome back. So we just left off talking about how AI could be used to analyze all these employee comments. And I don't know about you, but that's fascinating to me. It seems like it could really change how companies gather feedback, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And this research is really just kind of scratching the surface of what's possible.
Oh, wow.
Like, imagine the time and the resources that organizations could save if they had AI helping to analyze all kinds of text data.
Yeah.
Like not just employee surveys, but customer reviews, social media posts.
It's almost like having this superpowered assistant who can just like go through all this information and be like, here are the important parts.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about a productivity boost.
Right.
Yeah, but just like any powerful tool we have, to be really mindful about how we use it. And the research really highlights the importance of finding that right balance between AI's capabilities and the need for human oversight.
Yeah, like you wouldn't want to rely solely on AI to interpret something like employee feedback, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so nuanced and complex, there are always going to be those little cues and context clues that a machine might miss.
Yeah, And that's a really good point. That's what the research showed, that while AI judges can be incredibly consistent and efficient, they sometimes struggle with those more nuanced interpretations that humans are just naturally good at.
Okay. So it's not really a question of humans versus machines. It's more like how can we use them together to get the best results?
Precisely. It's about AI augmenting human capabilities, not necessarily replacing them entirely.
Right.
There's more of a collaboration. AI can handle those huge amounts of data, process it very quickly, and then humans can provide that expertise to really dig into those findings and make the more nuanced judgments.
I see. So like maybe AI could do like the initial screening of job applicants, but then a human hiring manager makes the final decision based on their experience, their intuition.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And it's
Yeah.
especially important when you're talking about something like employee feedback, where there's a lot of subjectivity involved. We need to make sure that these systems aren't missing those important perspectives or maybe even, accidentally perpetuating biases.
Okay, so we definitely need to keep humans in the loop to make sure things are fair and accurate. But I'm curious about how this research impacts like me as an employee. Like if my company starts using AI to analyze feedback, what does that mean for me?
That's a really great question, and one that we should all be thinking about as AI becomes more common in our work lives.
Yeah.
I think it's really crucial that employees understand how these systems work,
Yeah.
what their limitations are, and how their data might be used.
So basically, be informed, ask questions.
Exactly. Transparency is key.
Hmm.
If your organization is using AI to analyze feedback, don't hesitate to ask, how does this system work? What steps are being taken to make sure it's fair and accurate?
Yeah, maybe even ask how employees can be involved in shaping these systems.
Absolutely. The more we all understand about AI and how it's being used, the better equipped we are to advocate for it being used responsibly and ethically.
So it's not just about being passive observers. We need to be active participants in figuring out the future of AI and how it's used. But that kind of leads me to another question. Like, how do we make sure that these AI systems are actually capturing the diverse voices of all employees?
That is a really critical question, and it's one that researchers and companies are really struggling with right now.
Hmm.
How do we make sure that these systems are not just efficient, but also fair and representative of all the people they're supposed to be serving?
Yeah, and how do we make sure that they're not accidentally silencing some voices or amplifying others? Like, that seems like a whole other layer of complexity.
You're absolutely right, and it really deserves a lot more attention and exploration. And in the final part of our deep dive, we're going to be examining some of the ways that organizations can actually use these AI judges responsibly and ethically, and what steps we can all take to ensure a future where AI is actually working for everyone.
All right, so welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. We've been talking about AI judging employee feedback, and it seems like there's a lot to consider both for companies using this technology and also for the employees, right?
Absolutely. There's a huge responsibility to make sure that these systems are being used ethically and in a way that's really effective.
So let's talk about solutions. Like, what can organizations do to make sure that they get this right?
Well, the research we've been talking about
Hmm.
actually offers some really practical recommendations. Like, one of the key takeaways for me is the idea of bringing diverse perspectives to the table.
Okay.
And that's important, both when these AI systems are being developed, but also when people are interpreting the results.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, if you want a system that's fair and unbiased, you need to make sure it was built by people and is being used by people from a variety of backgrounds who have different points of view.
Right, exactly. Diversity really helps to sort of mitigate some of those inherent biases that can creep into any system, especially something as complex as AI.
Yeah.
And it also makes sure that the AI is sensitive to different cultural norms and values, which
Yeah.
is super important when you're dealing with something as subjective as employee feedback.
So it's not just about the technology, it's really about the people behind it, too.
Exactly. That human element is crucial. Another really important recommendation is transparency. Companies need to be upfront about how they're using AI, how it's actually impacting employees.
I can definitely see why that's important. Like, if people don't understand how their feedback is being analyzed or how AI is being used in decisions, it can cause a lot of mistrust and uncertainty.
Absolutely. Transparency really helps to build trust, and it allows for a more open dialogue between organizations and their people. And that's why it's also important to involve employees in the process right from the get-go.
So not just telling them about it, but actually giving them a voice in how these systems are developed and implemented.
Exactly, yeah. The researchers suggest that, we need to be incorporating employee feedback into the design and the testing of these AI systems. And it really helps to make sure that the technology is aligned with the needs and values of the people who are actually going to be, impacted by it.
That makes a lot of sense. And it brings us back to that idea of AI, working with human capabilities and not necessarily replacing them entirely. It's really more about working together.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And even once these systems are up and running, it's super important to have systems in place for monitoring and evaluation.
Like regular checkups to make sure everything is working the way it's supposed to and that, no biases are kind of creeping in.
Exactly. And that's where that human oversight comes back into play again. We need to have people in the loop reviewing the judgments that the AI is making and making those final decisions that really require that human understanding and taking those ethical considerations into account.
So I guess it's all about finding that sweet spot where we're harnessing the power and efficiency of AI, but we're also making sure that human judgment and human values stay at the center of the process.
I think that's a great way to put it. Responsible AI is really about using these amazing technologies in a way that benefits everyone, but also in a way that safeguards our values and our rights.
Well said. So we've covered a lot of ground today, from, the technical details of how AI can judge text to those big picture implications for the future of work. What are your final thoughts for our listeners today?
I think it's really important for everyone to stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged. This whole world of AI is constantly changing and it's impacting all of us. So the more that we understand about these technologies and the more we participate in these conversations, the better equipped we'll be to help shape a future where AI is being used ethically and effectively, for the benefit of everyone.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into this really fascinating world of AI judges.
It's been my pleasure.
Until next time, everyone, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning.